Hi, my name is Maria Dawson. I am currently a student in Florida International University. For my final project in my Theory of Personalities class, which I chose to talk about a children's book, and in my case, The Secret Garden. This book means a lot to me since I was a very, very little girl. So I hope everybody enjoys my presentation. When Mary Lennox starts out in India with her parents, she's in a village where an outbreak of cholera kills everyone except for her. She's sent to live with her uncle, Mr. Craven. He lives in a place called Misselthwaite Manor. Mr. Craven has been in grief for 10 years since his wife passed away. When she arrives, she oversees Martha Sowerby, her servant and her maid, talk about a secret garden. This garden is where Mrs. Craven's wife died. So for him, it was very hard to look at it. So he locked the garden and hid the key because the garden reminded him of his wife. This garden then became the Secret Garden. Mary wants to find this garden and the key. Martha gets her a skipping rope, and after she skips for a while, she becomes a better person, both physically and emotionally. She makes friends with Ben Weatherstaff, which is the gardener. She makes friends with a robin bird and Martha and her family. She's especially fond of Deacon, Martha's brother, who is good with animals and very good with plants. One day, Mary went to the garden and found a robin that was somewhat telling her to follow him. She followed him just to find out that the robin had found the mysterious key buried on the ground. She then finds where the secret garden is, following the robin, and tries to bring it back to life with Deacon's help. Mary begins to hear cries coming from another room in the manor after a while of living there. So she decides to find out for herself, and then she meets Colin, who was born with the impression that he would die. He was raised in his own room with servants who had to do exactly what he wanted and as he wanted it. Also, his face was very similar to Mr. Craven's wife, so Mr. Craven couldn't bear to see him. Mary meets him every so often, but he gets mad when she goes to the garden instead of talking to him. He goes into one of his temper tantrums, very, very regular thing with Colin, and Mary had to yell at him for him to quiet down and stop. She proves to him that he has no problems or lumps on his back as he thought, and that the best thing he could do to get better was to go outside and breathe some fresh air. Mary and Deacon bring Colin down to the garden for several weeks. Colin works very, very hard with the help of Mary, Ben, and Deacon to get better, stronger, and healthier. After a few weeks, he learns to walk. Then they focus on the secret garden. They all take care of it and raise it back into a thriving, beautiful garden. Colin asks Mary, Deacon, and Ben not to say anything to anyone about him walking because he wanted it to give his dad a surprise. Mr. Craven received a letter from Miss Sowerby telling him that he needed to come back home. He also had a strange dream in where he kept on hearing the phrase, "Go see the garden." So then he decides to go back home. Colin gets a better attitude and a lot healthier. And when his father finally comes home, he runs to him and then shows him the garden. Mr. Craven was so excited and impressed, he ordered the garden to remain open. In order for us to be able to discuss a little bit further on what character traits or behavior personality traits we see in the book, we have actually compared two different theories that we had discussed during chapter 2 and 3. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to define the theories first, and then I'm going to tell you a little bit of what character did what in hopes that you will understand a little bit better on what the theory said. So let's start with the psychoanalytic theory. Founded by the Austrian neurologist and physician Sigmund Freud, Psychoanalytic theory is a framework for understanding the impact of the unconscious on thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. Psychoanalysis, the clinical application of Freud's theory, is a tool that explores the unconscious mind in order to relieve painful emotional symptoms and increase self awareness. Psychoanalysis is a forerunner of most forms of modern psychotherapeutic techniques today. To this day, excuse me, psychoanalytic theory and the practice of psychoanalysis continue to evolve in ways that support, discard, and expand some of Freud's original principles. Mary was utilizing the psychoanalytic theory and different methods in order to get Colin to do things and get rid of being always scared of what supposedly he had. Colin's head was playing a lot of different games that caused him to think that he was dying due to lumps that he had created in his back. None of this was real. All of this was due to people talking behind his back and the way he thought that people was judging him when they looked at him. Mary accomplished this by having Colin focus on different things like the grass, the light, the sun, the plants, the animals. At first, Colin was very close-minded and would not change his way until he felt that he was somewhat being challenged by Mary to do different things. Mary did the same exact thing with Mr. Craven. She helped him see his son again, and not to think about him as a reminder of his wife, Mr. Craven had lost years ago due to an accident from a tree branch just a bit after Colin was born. And as Colin grew up and became a little boy, he resembled more and more to his mom. But Mary showed Mr. Craven could not make his way to look at his son because of that. But Mary showed him that his son is a lot more than a resemblance and a boy in a wheelchair. He is a growing boy full of life that has learned how to walk and is his father. The other theory that we had to discuss was collective unconscious theory. According to the Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung, the collective unconscious is a part of the unconscious mind common to all humans, a reservoir of the experience of our species. The collective unconscious is characterized by archetypes, original models of people, objects, and concepts. Though initially Jung followed the Freudian theory of unconscious as the psychic strata formed by repressed wishes, he later developed his own theory to include some new concepts. The most important of them is the archetype. As a structure of the collective unconscious, archetypes are psychic innate dispositions to experience and represent basic human behavior in specific situations. Jung believed that the collective unconscious was inherited collections of images and knowledge that every human being has at birth. Like the way, for example, Colin instantly loved the animals that Dickon was bringing to him. Nobody taught him how to do that. Colin at first was very afraid of hurt and dying and was very, very angry at other people looking at him, but learned later on that this was not the case. There are very strong emotions that are included within us when we are born, and we cannot necessarily decipher where they come from. We just feel them, like the love that Colin had for his mom, even though he never met her. Another example is the love that Dickon had for the plants and animals around him, and the way he made the animals love him. Later on the book, you can understand how Dickon's mom is as loving and caring as Dickens and Martha. Some of the archetypes that the story have, for example, the persona in Colin. Mary used to bother him and call him the Raja because of how demanding he was and how he asked everything in a very strong and sturdy royal voice, which is what Colin actually wanted it to project to others. The animals in Mary and the anima in Dickon is how they act. Mary acts very independent, as a very independent person, and one that does not need help from anyone, but at the same time, Dickon appears to be and acts very, very empathetic towards plants and animals. The wise old man was actually characterized by Mr. Ben Weatherstaff, the gardener. He offered his advice and guided Mary, Colin, and Dickon into growing the new garden with different kinds of plants. The Great Mother is represented by Martha and Dickon's mom, Mrs. Sowerby. She is the mother figure for the entire story. She was very protective, caring, and very knowledgeable. The introvert and extrovert personalities are actually characterized by all characters at some point during the story. They all show different personalities and ways of engaging with other people. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity about making my final project my very favorite book. It has meant a lot to me to go back to my childhood. And you know what? It's reassuring to know that there is hope.